I'm playing the role of a student right now, and my professor sent me an invite for our Zoom class today. And there's a lot of things in here, but the big thing you want to do here is click on the link. Don't go to zoom.us and try to log in. Don't go to zoom.com. You need to click on this specific link that your professor sends you. If you're having problems, if your internet connection is really slow or something of that nature, you can also use one of the call-in numbers that are sent. So look down here for those. So I'm going to go ahead and start now by clicking on the Zoom session, and we'll get into it, and you'll get an idea of what it looks like. Now here I'm going to join with the video, and I'm going to join with computer audio. And you can see my professor's already here waiting.
Yes, I am. Hello,
But
how are
it,
you?
but it may be, hello, professor. It may be that your professor is not ready yet. You may be put in a waiting room or a holding area. So don't panic if you don't see your professor right away. It may be that she's not ready to quite start class yet. You'll usually see something like the host is waiting if the professor's not ready. So are we ready for today's lecture?
We are, and what I'd like to do when I start out with my classes, I would like to share an agenda for the day. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see what I'd like to talk about in today's class. So this is an agenda that I would typically share at my class, and hopefully you're seeing that right now. And as your professor, I would just talk through this. We'd have a little session for a few minutes, wait for other people to join, and then once I'm ready to go, I might then go right into a lecture, and I have a PowerPoint to share with you.
So one of the
So,
things that you should do as a student when you come in, if your professor forgets, and most of them will, is write down over here where it says mute. You can see that my microphone is still on. And if everybody's microphone is on, there's going to be a lot of crosstalk. You won't be able to understand what your professor is saying. So what you need to do is make sure that this is on the mute mode. So right now it's mute. I'm going to unmute it so the professor can hear me, but leave it on mute. Actually, I'm going to let the professor lecture, and I'm going to show you different ways you can ask a question of the professor. So one way would be, I'm going to go ahead and mute this. And if the professor is talking, I can unmute myself and ask the professor a question. Professor, how long should an executive summary be?
and I can go ahead and answer that question for you. And the good part of that is the rest of the class can hear that. So oftentimes when you're a student and you ask a question, it's a great thing because then as an instructor, I'm sure many of your other peers have a question and I can answer it for the whole class.
Just remember, after you ask your question, go ahead and mute yourself again. All right? Always make sure you're on mute if you're not talking. That way we won't have a lot of people talking over each other, and that's really, really important on these meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I want to show you two other ways your professor might ask you to ask questions. Your professor might ask you to stay on mute, but use the hand raise feature. Now, in the basic Zoom interface you see here, there doesn't seem to be any place to raise your hand. So if you come down here at the bottom, by the way, if this disappears, just hover your cursor down here. But come down here at the bottom, click on participants, and you can see down here there's a little thing where I can raise my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in a large class, this is really important because the professor then can identify who has a question and then call on you specifically. And don't forget, after the question, mute yourself. And if your professor forgets, lower your hand.
Yeah,
Otherwise, your professor might think you have another question.
that's true.
Okay? Some professors might also give you the ability to put a question in the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you don't see a chat box here. So what you'll need to do for that functionality is move all the way over here where it says More. Click on that and click on the chat, or you can hit Alt-H on a PC. So here I can type to the professor, how long should an exec summary be? And she can then have a running list of these questions and then see it may be that a bunch of people are asking the same question. She can answer them or, pause when it's a good idea to pause and address the question.
Sure. And I'm doing that right now. So I am actually typing an answer And just so you know, though, be kind and patient with your professor, because if we get many questions in the chat, we may choose to actually respond via the chat while we're talking if we're pretty adept at that. Or we may just say, I just got a question from Ross and I'm going to answer it for everybody, which is a little easier for your instructor to do. So just be mindful of that if there's a lot of questions in the chat, it's actually hard to
That's the way
speak
I
and
would do
chat.
it because I can't type and talk at the same time easily. Just one other thing in the chat. If you want to talk to one of your friends in class, maybe you have a team or something of that nature, I can privately talk to someone. So instead of everyone, click down here and choose. This will be a list of everybody who's on the Zoom. You can chat privately with someone. So I'm just pointing that out. Again, and your professor may also decide to disable that kind of thing. Again, you don't usually talk to other people in class while your professor's lecturing, hopefully. So your professor may or may not decide to enable that.
I am one of those instructors who does not enable the private chat.
Okay. So again, it may be there if your professor might say, okay, you can talk amongst yourselves. It's up to the professor. So just letting you know it's there. Also be careful if you're chatting privately with someone and you go back to everyone, everybody will see your private chat, including the professor. So when you're saying nasty things about Professor Yosh to your friends, everybody might see it. So you better be careful about that one. Now, there may come a time in your class where your professor wants you to share your screen with the class. For example, you're doing a presentation. So let's go ahead and show that functionality.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with Ross.
Okay, so now I can share my screen, and when you need to share your screen, you'll come down here where it says Share Screen. Click on this, and it'll give you the ability to share any screens that you have open. I happen to have a lot of screens open right now. Yours probably won't look as messy as mine, but I'm just going to come over here, and now I'm sharing this with the class. Or if you're in a private session with your professor, this will be shared. It could be any screen. So again, let me show you. I'm going to stop the share. So up here where it says Stop Share, I'm going to click on that. That turns it back over. But I don't just have to share PowerPoint. For example, I can share a website. I can share a whiteboard. So again, if I'm like, I'm having a really hard time with Zoom, I can share, whatever, the Zoom website, or maybe it's something that you're working on. Maybe you're working on an Excel spreadsheet or a document that you want the professor to look at. You can share any screen that you can bring up on your computer with your professor. When you're done, just click up here on Stop Share, and it goes back to normal. And now you're back into the regular session. All right.
And that's a useful tool if you happen to be doing office hours with your instructor and you have a question about your homework. Have that document open and ready to share, so that when you are in that session with your instructor and they'll let you share your screen, you can pull up your document and say, on line 2 or paragraph 2, this is where I'm struggling.
Excellent. There's also some other quick things you can do. You can, if you have it turned on, you can give reactions to your professor. Thumbs up, clapping. Those are always good. Yes, no, go faster, go slower. Those kind of things over here. You got to get to control your professor, right? Like, go faster. No, faster.
Don't stress out your professor.
Right, yeah. But again, like, your professor might ask for a quick instant poll. For example, did everybody understand that last point? I can click yes, that I understood it, or I click no, that I didn't understand it. So again, if your professor asks for like an instant poll, this is where you'll find it on the in the participants area. So again, if you're not seeing the participants area, or you're not seeing the chat, I just want to make sure everybody can get to both of those. Participants area is right here, Manage Participants, and that's where you get your hands up. It's not on me anymore because I'm no longer I'm a co-host now. So if you take back all the hosting, Professor, unhost me.
I'm going to reclaim. Hold on. I have to unhost you. You should be unhosted now.
Okay. When that happens, you'll get the hand raised back, but because I'm in a host mode, it's not coming up. Don't worry about that. And then also, if the chat doesn't come up, you're going to come over here into the chat mode, and you'll see the chat over here. So I think that covers just about everything from a student perspective. There's a little bit more functionality, but it's probably pretty rare that you would use any of it. And if you are, your professor will probably go into that in more detail with you. So go ahead and get Zooming, and good luck.
Good luck.